6.0, reconvene open session. The Board of Trustees are hereby reconvening open session at 7:47 p.m. 6.1, call to order. The Board of Trustees, call to order. The Board of Trustees are hereby opening session at 7:47. 6.2, roll call. Trustees to identify themselves by first and last name to formally establish quorum. Dana Ridland, Area 2.
Cindy Gardner, Area 3.
Jordan Zarate, Trustee Area 5.
Bill Mellinger, Trustee Area 1.
Natalie Lindeman, Trustee Area 4.
7.0, closed session report. Announcement of reportable actions taken during closed session. None. Let's see what the number is here. 8.0, reports and presentations. 8.1, setting direction. LCAP, board discussion and budget priorities, Board of Trustees.
Yay.
So, we'll get this out here. So, LCAP, board discussion and budget priorities. Let's see, in terms of here. Does anybody want to kick off discussion? So budget. What was that? Somebody else, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Oh my gosh. So, Bill, do you want to go first? Okay.
No.
Okay, so board discussion and budget priorities. So, sorry. So some of the issues and the concerns within the data. Okay, so some of the discussion, the observation coming out of data, conversations, observing, going to our little board commitments of observing different groups. One thing I'm going to start with is parent engagement, especially for our ELAC, DLAC participation. I know that we were talking about it at the last DLAC, that how do we connect and reach out and have more parents participate in the meaningful conversation. The few parents that do go to DLAC have been awesome and fearless in giving input, but it's just having just two parents at a DLAC is very disheartening, and you feel like you're letting that population of parents and students, and therefore students, down. So I think we talked about it, what works, what can we do, what can we change, and I think that's something that we really need to do a better job on it. I'm going to start. I think that we really definitely need to decrease DF rates, and because that leads to my other big, huge issue is A to G completion rate. And I think if we focus, I know that we are talking about math intervention teacher at secondary, and various things that we can utilize COVID money for. I think that's a great start. But let's put things in place that are sustainable, that can keep that DF rate down and therefore increase our A to G completion rate. I think that for me, making sure that we, Run of the World Unified School District, we allow the students to choose their future, and we've given them all the tools possible and the supports possible to make those choices their senior year is really important, whether it's college or career. So this doesn't preclude career exploration at all. More significant use of virtual job shadow, if that's what we're going to continue moving forward with. How is that going to be really embedded within the practices of the school day? I just think that it's really important that we really bring it down even to the kindergarten level. Let's have these conversations. And I know that at least when my kids were at Grandview, we would have in the classrooms talk about careers and bring in people to talk to the kids about their career. And I just think it's a really it's really important for our kids to have that conversation starting very early. And then we need to make sure that we're putting in the practices, the interventions, the targeted assistance, the support at home, the informational, like Jessica Erlanger's college help class, those things to round out that discussion. So DF, decrease for me is really important, and therefore increasing the A through G completion rate. I do want to acknowledge that the work that's been done in the last month to look at the A through G classes, and we already have five, now we're up to 5, that are now categorized as A through G approved, and it's retro, so we're going to capture more kids. But if we don't if we don't work on DF, because a kid has to have that C or above to meet that requirement. I really believe that reading and math skills at an early level, grades 1 through 3, is so vastly important, because if they have solid reading skills, especially the denser material of science later, they'll understand it. But if they're struggling with reading, I don't even know how you get through some of the science. And I'm talking even 5th grade science. I'm just saying, I've seen some of those textbooks, and there's dense reading in there. So for me, a budget priority is how do we make sure that what grades 1 through 3. I'm not ignoring kindergarten, but I'm especially concerned with grades 1 through 3 because of the pandemic. I just feel next year's kinders are coming in without having had distance learning. So hopefully, well, maybe our TKs did, so never mind. But anyways, I'm just saying that reading and math. Budget priorities, professional development for staff. I think it's so important for us to make sure that we're collaborating with our teachers on giving them what they need for the classroom instruction and for support. And I think that's really, really important as a budget priority. And of course, an LCAP is to keep collaborating with them and setting the PD days and setting we got the PD schedule, and it's brilliant. Let's just keep going. And I love it. I'll think of something. Those were my top. Math scores district-wide are a concern. I think that the plan that we have in place in terms of utilizing the money to shore up class sizes and math intervention for secondary, I think that's really needed. I don't know I think messaging out to our juniors to make sure that they take that test seriously, that's an ongoing issue. So some kind of campaign or program to have juniors take that seriously, because I really think our kids are smarter than 15.9% of them meeting that or exceeding that standard. I think social emotional learning, mental health support is going to be so huge in the next couple years. I think that we need to put a focus. We need to have the Kelvin surveys really monitor that. We need to put it using COVID money again. I think we have a real great opportunity to put things in place, wellness centers or school psychologists or whatever in that plan to really shore up social emotional supports for our students. And then looking at the PD component for our teachers that ties into that. I think that we need to have them interconnected. They can't be all just separate. And utilizing, as Jordana always says, what are our community organizations and resources that can help us achieve what we need to achieve, especially in this area of SEL. So again, outreach, more than just parent engagement, but community outreach to help us achieve some of those goals, especially in social emotional learning. Somebody else can now take over if you want. Jump in.
I think you've covered a lot of it, Cindy, but But one of the things that I wanted, that I had written down was definitely socio-emotional. I think that's going to be a priority for schools across the nation, not just in the state. But as well, I wanted to touch on your first point, ELAC participation, and really more, yes, yeah, it is struggle. It is a struggle. And I would love to be able to see as a budget priority more investment in somehow reaching out and connecting better with in the community, those that don't speak English. I think there's a lot of ways that we can do that. And I think it would certainly fall in line with the use of potential learning recovery funds, because those are the students that need help. English language learners are part of those student groups that need some help and further investment in. So those were the two that really stood out to me that were on my list that overlapped pretty well with what you had to say, Cindy.
I think too that in reaching that parent community, that it's more than just, hey, come be part of ELAC and come be part of DLAC. We need to really look at CHE used to have that night where parents and children and their students would come to on campus to strengthen their English skills. Those kinds of programs together that actually are on campus so that they feel comfortable being on campus and feeling more comfortable in speaking up about, hey, this is great. And I know this is a little bit off topic, but it relates to HUG. Long Beach Unified, they put on a parent university for EL parents themselves. And Hispanic parents, sorry, it is all encompassing, but they really focus on that student group and first generation students. And they teach the parents about college admissions, the benefit of college, helping them understand the FAFSA. And it's all in these increments, small increments, so it's not so overwhelming. And by the end of it, the school district actually takes them on a field trip to their agreement school, Cal State Long Beach. And the kids tour that campus together with their parents, and it all makes the connections and the dots. And that is a very successful program and an outreach. And so, and I'm not just saying just for college, but like what kind of programs that we can, to, like you said, really reach into that community instead of just asking them, come to this meeting and give me our opinion, because sometimes that doesn't work. We need to provide babysit. What's worked on site has been babysitting services, food, because it's dinner time, and allowing their kids to eat the food too. And I know that might sound superficial to some people, but when you see the attendance at Grandview, the PTA worked with the ELAC parents, and we brought together a full Children of the Day program for that school, very much immersing all students into the culture of Mexico. And it was great. It was great. And so I'm just talking about, like, what can we think of that goes beyond, hey, come to this meeting?
That's a great idea, Cindy. Was there anything else, Jordan, that you wanted to add?
Just general agreement. You're right. It's not just about inviting or outreach in a way. It's providing that feeling of being welcome. Right? So part of that community outreach could very well be, more bilingual outreach to make people feel comfortable and want to contribute. Because we know that's a struggle with anything, even without that meeting. It's a struggle to get people to come. And it's a matter of getting the messaging out that we want to hear, we want to learn, we want to know the opinions, and I think that should carry for the whole do so. Yeah, I think it's well said, Cindy.
I think tying three of those things together is the A through G criteria, the outreach for that population or all of our population, and portrait of the graduate, and getting the college or career stuff planted early on in the elementary schools. That's going to be a great opportunity to launch that in the next year, and draw those families in, get them set up from the get-go of what those A through G criteria are and expectations are, so they know what they're working towards all throughout their education.
One of the things that has been on my mind a while, recently, just in terms of recent board meetings and talking about A through G requirements is the number of students that I've had and community members that I know who they're not intending to go to college. And one of the things I would tell students, my own kids, is make sure you're not closing any doors. So, don't be careful about the choices that you make as a K through 12 student, because you don't want to create a situation that you don't have opportunities available to you as easily just because of not taking certain courses or doing certain things. However, at the same time, I'm really thrilled that we're able to reclassify some existing courses, especially our CTE classes, because it seems like there has been pathways that have not necessarily been set in stone, but because of limited master schedule at secondary, there's only been certain classes that students can take because of when the master schedule is offering them to them, and it, in a way, is tracking students. So what I wonder about when we're taking a look at LCAP and looking at budget priorities is being creative and making sure that students are able to take courses or be involved in programs that's opening doors for them and not stigmatizing the career choice. And so, and I think we often correlate A through G, meaning college bound.
And it's not.
Right, and especially now that we're getting the CTE classes reclassified or classified as A through G, I think that really is going to help. But also evaluating how master schedules are being offered or how courses are being offered now that we've had more distance learning opportunity thanks to COVID. Possibly expending resources financially or brain power and looking at how we're offering educational options and making sure that we're servicing the needs of our students, especially students that would be at risk, who may also have a lot of things in life that they're contending with. Maybe we can be more creative in how we can meet them with their needs.
I would say education should be opening doors and not narrowing options. And if there's anything that we can do to allow them to explore more of those throughout their, academic time with us, the better.
I'm talking with a high school student yesterday, and her dismay, she's a junior, would have liked to have taken calculus this year, but also had been, it had been recommended that she take AVID, and the two are offered at the same time. And that is the nature of what we're dealing with on the mountain. And so she's really happy with having taken AVID, but at the same time dismayed that, she's going to take calculus next year or stats. But just those are kinds of the reality of the choices that our students are making, that maybe we can reevaluate how we're offering things so they don't have to be put in that position. Open more doors. Bill, did you have anything to add? Bill? Oh, he's thinking. Got it, okay.
My mind's just at some other different places. Yeah. I appreciate the talk about career choice and that we need to make sure that we're continuing to develop opportunities for kids. And I think that's frankly been one of the strengths of what we offer here at RIM. That is something different than other schools and even the charter schools and things like that. And so I think that's something to continue to develop and promote. But my mind, unfortunately, is still back on the learning recovery issues and the mental health issues I think we're going to have to address. And I think that's both an LCAP and in budget priorities for next year. And just as I keep thinking about that, I also think that somewhere in this process, we've learned about online schooling, if you will, hybrid schooling, using electronic technological tools and things like that. And I think we're going to have to continue to develop that. Our home choice, I think, or our virtual academy, I think those things have got to be expanded and developed and promoted in ways that could give some of that creative opportunity, even for a student that might be on campus part of the time, but maybe they're in the virtual academy another part of the time, which gives them an opportunity to, and maybe they do calculus in the virtual academy while they're doing AVID on campus. I'm just thinking that we need that kind of creativity. And then back to the other subject of the different families, if you will. our families are very diverse on this mountain, not just in language, but in the families that a student is being cared for by an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent, which is probably the biggest number, or they're with 3 other families, and the need to be able to communicate with the people that are important to that student. And it's going to be more than a parent, maybe in many cases. And how we do that, I think that's a gap and a challenge, Heather, that we have, isn't it? And how do we get that information from them and get connected to them? And all those are challenges for us as we try to work on LCAP.
And I would add to that, ties into what Cindy was talking about earlier, is figuring out ways to be able to communicate and provide outreach in a way that's comfortable for them, being sensitive to various cultural backgrounds, and maybe it being perceived as being disrespectful to ask questions, being able to create a safe environment so that we are approachable and accessible. The program they were talking about was that was at CHE. I believe it was either Rim Family Services or Mountain Counseling that was providing once a month family support, where it was a potluck. Everybody, and that was part of what got people coming, was the food, but also being able to give, not just receive food, and having childcare at the same time. So parents were engaged, well, kids were engaged, and it became a huge community event on a monthly basis that was centered around the elementary school, and it helped bring in those populations that we were trying to reach. So possibly looking at as a budget priority, being able to, and that would tap into socio-emotional health. That would also tap into connection with the community and being able to deploy resources in that fashion.
Boy, I agree with that. I think that we've got to look at even the possibility of like that, paying for providing childcare for the family members so they can. I also think that we may have to be as creative and budget for a person to translate into English from Spanish and have meetings that might be held in Spanish with some parents, so that they're comfortable and they're being translated to us versus us being translated to them. And I'm saying us as me, an English speaker, instead having it the meeting all in Spanish and me being the one getting the translation, so I'm learning and hearing what they're saying and understanding. That way they're in their cultural environment. Because unfortunately, let's face it, a lot of people that are Spanish speakers are going to be shy about being in the meeting and trying to speak English or even speaking up in Spanish. So if it was all in Spanish, it might be better received.
Bill, I'm going to give an example of the success when we had a Spanish-speaking assistant principal here, Mariano Arande. He was the EL coordinator and conducted the ELAC meetings here, and he would do individual phone calls in their native language to encourage them to come. And he made a phone call to every single one of those parents, and then the conversation evolved. During that phone conversation, the parent felt comfortable in bringing up concerns that they had, maybe with a course selection or whatever. And the attendance at ELAC here rose from 5 parents to well over 25 parents. And he coordinated with PTA to say, hey, can you bring some food? And we're going to have the kids here, and they can sit off to the side and eat, and we can have conversation with the parents. And he conducted the entire meeting in Spanish with them, and I'm sitting observing and going, and I would ask Mr. Cocker, and what are they saying? What are they saying? What's going on? And it was great because it was intense back and forth conversation. It was great. So I think that you are spot on, is that you can see a difference in that ability to carry on an entire meeting not being translated from English to Spanish and then Spanish back to English.
This ties 2 more topics in my mind, is that nothing can replace that human to human interaction, and that human outreach is what's needed a lot of times. It's obviously more effective than sending an email or a parent square or a Facebook post. doing something more personal is what gets people to feel welcome and feel connected and going to them rather than asking them to come to us. So if we can find creative ways to do that, I think that will work. Also in regards to human interaction with the socio-emotional learning and just the welfare and health of our kids, I want us to be very mindful that we don't rely on technology too much because we've been forced to. We need to be sure that we are having those wellness centers on site with humans and as part of them, because there's much more that a person will tell you face to face. They will seek support more, and more can get done than doing. Even though Kelvin and Care Solace and those things are marvelous, they just don't replace the human aspect of it.
I was going to say that I know this is, I know that as we go along and we talk about declining enrollment, I do want to give a shout out to the fact that I think that athletics plays an important role in both keeping the grades up because athletes have to maintain a C average. They can't play with an F. I think that athletics are important. So, continuing our and now that I know you're going to agree, and especially for personal story, I know that my Kira who had ADHD, for her, every afternoon playing soccer or running cross country or track, and Joe Gerardo busted her butt, something fierce on her times, but it allowed her to decompress so that when she came home, she was ready to do her homework. She needed that time to decompress and sitting still for all those hours out of her way, all the wiggles when they were younger. Let's get your wiggles out so you can learn. That for a teenager is one avenue. And we do have strong athletic, like over 1/3 of our students, like almost 40% of our students participate in sports.
It's directly tied to improved grades, better emotional health, more social skills, and that sense of community. We were lucky enough to have our first home game last night for basketball, and we won, yay, JV and varsity. And so, the community is part of that too. It touches every aspect of things that we want to improve on in our district, but things that we are really good at too. And so, huge focus. Thank you, Cindy.
I would add arts as well, music, drama, that just those additional programs provide that community, provide that teamwork. And so I'm a huge fan of all of that and being able to provide lots of different options for students to immerse themselves.
Every
Yes.
kid learns differently. And I know I was a drama student, yay. And so, you just approach everything different, and to have that niche for yourself where there's an acceptance, there's that group that you feel safe with, and that you can do all these amazing artistic, creative, which of course, music, we all know that music helps math. So just saying.
I've always thought it interesting that we call certain things extracurricular when they really contribute to the curriculum, whether that is music or so band or choir or drama or art or athletics or any of that. They're all part of that educational experience. And in every one of them, you learn academics. There's academic experience in every one of those things. And so those things are important. And again, it's hard to do when you're trying to reduce things and handle a lower budget. But yet those are things that are vital, I think, to the student's life.
And
Well said.
as a psychologist, I need to throw in that, the two greatest factors to decrease mental health issues are a feeling of connectedness, that social group, and belongingness. And so if we can create those through non-extra necessary curricular activities, we're doing well for our kids.
One thing is I want to just give a shout out to our facilities director and Jenny in creating a yearly schedule of maintenance and upgrades to our facilities. And we do need to pay attention to facilities and making sure that we have safe and clean facilities. And then on that part, just sustaining our technology. We got to one-to-one devices. We have smart boards. We have cameras in the classrooms. We have these things by virtue of COVID money, which is a silver lining, but we really need to make sure that we are building sustainability with our technology, because we don't want to like gotten this far, yay, and then we start to slide. We just need to stay on top of it. Just like our buildings, we have to take care of our buildings every year. We need to take care of our technology every year. I know we're doing a lot, but it's like we get all the reports all year long and you go, okay, that's every piece is interconnected, like a Jenga. We're playing Jenga and one piece is pulled out, the whole thing can really cave down for our students, for our sites, for our teachers, our staff, our classified, everybody. So, oh, sorry, let's do that again.
Does anybody have anything else to add? Okay, excellent. There's a lot of really good points that were brought up, I think. Okay, so then moving on to 8.2, board self-evaluation, develop action plans, setting board goals, superintendent and board of trustees.
So every year during this time, I prepare, I look at the survey results before you get them from CSBA, the board self-assessment, self-evaluation, and I prepare a document to help guide your discussion. So I'm going to share that with you this evening. I need you to know that 4 board members out of 5 took the survey before it closed. And 1 person took the survey twice, answering not sure every time. So the data is a little skewed. So what I'm doing, when you look at your results, I've left off the last column of the not sure, except where there was more than 1 answer. So I can't tell you who took it twice because they don't know. So, but they do know that only 4 of your email addresses logged in. So the survey has 58 questions. And then what we look at from there is we look at areas of strength and areas of growth based on those responses. So some of them have changed from the year prior and some have not. And then what I'll do is I'll give you a copy of your board goals for this school year, and then your discussion will be based on the next steps in writing the goals. So areas of strength, and I didn't notice mine didn't print, so mine's all cut off. So areas of strengths for you based on your scores, I just compiled them. What areas had the most 4s, or the areas that said always, almost always. You could have responded often, less often, rarely, or not sure. So the areas where were the most positive. Overall, the entire survey results were blue. There were no areas of red or yellow where there was discord or an area of growth or for most or the simple majority of the members. So blue means that it's a strength for the simple majority. So every single question was blue. So if we look at the strengths, they would be board unity. So that was questions 1 through 6. Board structure, questions 40 through 43. And board support, questions 44 through 47. And this was based again on that almost always response, just looking at areas that had the most 4s. So that's where you would have rated yourself as having your strengths. For the areas of growth, this is where there was, I would say, more answers that were in the often area versus in almost always. So one of the areas would be community leadership, questions 54 through 58. Board meetings, questions 25 through 31. And the next three areas were all tied. So you could choose one of those if you wanted to. I wasn't going to break the tie because they're all scored the same. So those were board operations, board culture, and setting direction. So the top two were more obvious than the bottom three. The next slide is a copy of your 2021 goals. And your next steps would be to look at goals for next year and have a discussion about this evaluation. You should have a copy of all of the questions and the results. My presentation is to kick off your discussion.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yes.
Michelle, would you mind going, or could you go back to the strengths so we can start there with? Thank you. There's so much consensus on these that I don't think that any of us are surprised by the strengths or even the weaknesses. I don't know if people want to comment on each one. No, we know and agree. All right, let's go to the next one. So for me, I feel like the year prior to this, we took a huge initiative in this area, the community leadership. And as a result of COVID, I think it has been a lot more challenging for us to keep up with that. And I know myself that I have not been as active in the community as I was in prior times. And all of us are putting down often or almost always. We're still feeling like we're okay at this, but I think that's where I recognized a kind of decline in performance from the past. So I don't know if others agree, disagree, or want to add something to that.
I think it's just an interesting dynamic reflecting on community meetings for myself. There were community meetings that I could never get to because of schedules and the pandemic, because they've been Zoom, and I could get to multiple meetings by Zooming in and Zooming out. I was able to get to more community meetings than I had been in the past, yet you miss that connection of being in a meeting in person. So it was a very different experience for me, just in reflection. I know time with trustees didn't have a large turnout, and we struggled to get those up, and we're still struggling to get them up and running for the rest of the school year. So, I mean, those are some things that I think fall into this area. It was I just noted it was interesting. Like I got to go, so I had people say like, "Oh, you get to come." And I said, well, it's easier to get to things when I'm not running from here to there, and I can do multiple things. So.
Michelle, back up for me a little bit, just so I understand the way this came out there. Community leadership would be the one where we had the least amount of unity on for responses, or we?
The least amount
our
of
lowest
fours.
numbers?
The least amount of fours.
So our largest area of opportunity,
Yeah.
This is our own evaluation of our performance.
So I had mostly 4s and 3s in community leadership. So, it has seemed like COVID has limited the board in doing some of the things like meeting with trustees. What do you call it, Jordan?
And the trustees.
time with trustees.
Time with trustees, some of those kinds of things where you would just go out and be in a more casual setting. And we've been really kind of hindered from doing that. I know as far as Crestline Connect, Jordan has been there regularly communicating things. In fact, I get impressed just listening to the information that she has. And so,
Every area was blue. So it was difficult to even, every area was a strength for the simple majority. So that's why sometimes when we do these, we have areas of red and yellow where it's easier to define strengths and weaknesses. This one was, I just solely went on that number because everything was positive.
So what I'm seeing here, I mean, if I take it as a whole, rather than looking at the different categories, is I would say that on the whole, continuum of being a functionally working group in terms of how we feel we work together to dysfunctional, I would say we're definitely feeling cohesive and that we're feeling good about our performance. But when I look at each of the different categories, like how, conditions of effective governance or roles and responsibilities, looking through in there, frankly, within each of those groups, it's predominantly strong. So what I wonder is if it might be helpful to take a look at the particular items that maybe show that we're not feeling as strong about, and maybe use that as a stepping stone then to when we start talking about our goals. Because I'm looking at this here and I have a lot of affection for everybody at this table. And I think that there's a trust and a combined purpose that I think that we are generally working towards. So my thought is we're working towards fine tuning our efforts as opposed to really trying to restructure anything.
so
And I think it would have been green across the board had someone not answered not sure to every single question.
So Jordana, going that way, I kind of like that idea because the item up there, board culture, was probably my area. And I actually have a 0 on point 13. And point 13 is the board manages internal conflicts in a productive manner. And I haven't seen conflict yet inside the board. So I'm just frankly wondering how we're going to handle that when we have conflict within the board.
Well, conflict could also be disagreement. And I think one of the things that I really appreciate about this board is we disagree respectfully. We talk things through, we learn from each other, and then we come to whatever kind of a decision, not necessarily all in agreement even at that point, but still having respect. So I would argue that that would be a conflict, not necessarily a altercation of any sort, but we don't all have, we have conflicting viewpoints.
Are you conflicting with what Bill just said?
Well, and evidenced by the last 2 hours we just spent together. We do not all agree all of the time, but we respect each other enough to do it in an appropriate way and navigate that conflict, I think, very well.
Well, that's interesting too, Natalie, because we answered all this before the last 2 hours.
If you don't mind, one of the lower ones that she had up there was board meetings. And when I do go down to the individual items, as Jordana suggested, there was a bit of a consensus on our length of time in board meetings. And so we all agree that that can be an area of improvement. That being said, I love our calendar and we have to address all of those things. So I'm curious from the rest of my team, where you think we could shave some time off of those.
I think that I think that for me, at least, I am just loving the amount of time, the length of time, because when I first started, there were 2 meetings a month and even a quote unquote board workshop. It could be short, like only an hour in length, but it also could be quite long. And we had board meetings that would always run past the 10:30 time. And so right now I'm like grateful that we don't have 2 meetings every single month. And that has been a world of change, I have to say. And there's definitely a lot less conflict.
Well, and I know that we had requested at a point, and Michelle facilitated this, was having certain reports be kind of pared down a little bit, giving people who are providing us reports kind of timeframes or time limits to those two. So I know that there is effort in that, but
Yeah, and you want to be careful about making sure that you don't cut off your nose to spite yourself, because the fact that, like today's conversation in terms of LCAP discussion, we are giving important direction. So, and in order to give that direction, you have to have the information on your or EL students and reclassification. You have to have that lengthy high school reports, those lengthy high school reports, because so much of the dashboard is driven by high school data that is only done from the site itself, or special education, which is a whole beast in and of itself, making sure that we're servicing the students well, but recognizing the challenges of providing the services. So I mean, sometimes the report itself deems to have more time than other reports, and trying to find that balance is I appreciate the fact that the full length stuff for every single school, all the schools are done at once, the entire SIPSA gone through on the monitor. I can't even tell you how many hours we used to spend, right, Jenny, going through the SIPSAs, and then we had to do it again. And so I just appreciate the fact that now we are synthesizing that, because we can read the SIPSAs. That was like torture. By the last SIPSA, my head was exploding. So, I mean, there has been over the years that especially under Michelle saying, and Heather's direction too, we don't need the full presentation. And having 3 elementary schools, which are so similar, do their presentation together, where we can see the cross-pollination, is brilliant. It has cut down tremendously on the SIPSA stuff. So I'm saying that I agree, but we have to be careful about making sure that the reduction of time is not hindering our decision-making.
So you had mentioned not cutting off our nose despite our face. I agree with that we don't want to become too draconian in being able to look at meeting time. There have been times when we've been in meetings where I'm looking around at folks who are going to have to be back on this campus, and I temper that in my mind in terms of, is what I'm going to wish to say, is it going to add to the conversation? And is it worth keeping folks here for that amount of time? I would want to, I guess I would say there have been a couple of meetings that we've had where we've been incredibly efficient in that we've known that somebody had a plane to catch, or there were specific pressing things that we wanted to be able to make sure that we were down to business and we were targeted and we got things done. And I wonder if it might be an idea for us to be mindful and sometimes have more of that approach so that we're being respectful of all the people's time who are here.
I just want to remind you that the board meetings are for the board to do their business. And so I understand what you're saying, but I just want to caution that the board meeting is for us to be we can be more effective in what we say and not beat dead horses, so to speak, but just reminding everybody.
I'm about to beat a dead horse. We have a tendency to agree a lot of times, and I think we rephrase or paraphrase the same things that each other have already said. So I'm torn between how much the people that are taking the time to watch our meetings want to hear our voice, or if they want to hear, oh, I agree, and we can easily move on.
That's a great way to give the example.
Anything else on this particular one? Yeah, he does. Those eyes are twinkling over there.
It's gonna be good.
I agree. And I would add this on a different subject. It would help me to see more questions from the board ahead of time. And Michelle, I don't know how much we question things that, and I forget what item it was number 17 or 31 or something like that, about questions that the board asks of the superintendent ahead of time. It would be helpful to see some more of those questions, because I will learn more from the questions. One of the things that's been challenging for me is I felt like a lot of my training as a new board member has been on my shoulders. And a lot of that's because of COVID. Another part of that's because the four of you have learned well together. And I'm trying to come in and not mess up the mix. But if some of you had questions, or even would ask more questions ahead of time, even if, because I've seen it happen in a board meeting where a question was asked here so that the public could hear the answer to that question, I would appreciate that, to see more of that before a board meeting too, because those answers and those questions are beneficial for me.
I appreciate that point. I think we had the benefit of having three of us being new board members all at the same time. So we had tons of questions, and I have noticed that our number of questions have dropped off.
Yeah, I haven't received any to share with you.
So,
I didn't even hear what you said, sorry.
I haven't received any questions prior to board meetings to share with you. That's why you haven't gotten any.
But please know that historically there were many, and that was us not knowing, and just taking the time to ask. So, maybe we, as a team, we can all be more mindful. If we know this is something that's important to the community or might come up again, let us get clarification for all of us one more time.
I think this might be a good opportunity to, discuss a potential what can we do better. Maybe we should institute amongst our own board a formal way of having one-on-ones with each other. I know that we do that, and we tend to do it as when we both happen to have some time and our schedules line up, let's go meet and catch up. I think maybe in helping to orient new board members and help in facilitate better relationships, maybe we could formalize that a little bit more.
I'm kind of not comfortable with that, because I don't really want it, because I know myself, and instead of just talking processes, I might end up discussing district business. And then Jordan, you have lunch with me, and then you go have lunch with Natalie, and you guys end up doing the same thing. And we've created unintentionally a daisy chain. So I just know myself that I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, because I know my mouth.
That's fair, and perhaps it should be maybe more of an informal process targeted towards new board members. If we have a new board member, we should spend some time getting to know them, and maybe if we're cognizant of this is to get to know each other, not to talk about district business. Might be helpful.
And you know what was, Natalie brings this up all the time, is the convention is huge. That convention, the first convention that all of us went to, because we were together all the time, and we were in our workshops, and when we got together for dinner or for lunch, we spent more time getting to know each other and maybe talking about our workshops, how excited we were, than we didn't talk district business. And so and unfortunately, this past year, we didn't have that ability, and Bill didn't get that experience, but AEC is going to be in person. They're planning it in person. So I really think that that conference is so important for bonding, for getting to know each other, for spending all those days together is invaluable. I think it's money well spent, Michelle, our conference. We learn a lot, and then we get to know each other much better.
Will AEC be in Southern California again?
I think it's at the same venue.
I think it's supposed to be in Anaheim, right?
Yes, Anaheim.
So, Cindy, I really agree with all the risks of breaking the Brown Act and have concern about that. That's why I think if we could ask more questions, it would be a benefit for me, at least, if there was more questions asked ahead of time. I know I've been hesitant also because I don't want to appear as like, I'm questioning, what has staff done about this? And you've always, none of you have reacted negatively. You've answered thoroughly. So this is totally just in my own concern with, am I asking something the wrong way? So if others were asking questions, it would help me also pick up some things too.
Especially, you know what, Bill, you're correct, because because once you have a couple years and you understand what every year we approve these contracts and agreements, and what is this and what is that, and after like a couple years, you're like, I already know what that is, I already know, and you forget that someone new doesn't know what GAN is, or you don't know why are we approving this contract for this much money? It seems like a lot of money. And so I think maybe being more intentional at looking at the agenda through a newbie's eyes, so to speak, and realizing that we just need to we need to be able to bring that up so that Michelle can answer it, or Todd or Jenny or Heather and Derek, and that way that you can get caught up to speed and don't have to ask that question.
And even take that a step farther, Cindy, you already have done this where you've asked a question because you knew it would be something that the public might want to know. I think thinking that way also would be helpful if we asked questions and some of the rest of you were asking questions like we did. So because what's the view of the public? What's the view of the staff?
Well, sometimes the questions are based upon the presentation too, like Heather's presentation. She does a lot of presentations, so I'm actually bringing her up a lot. Sorry, Heather, I'm not picking on you, but she has so many presentations, and when she goes through the presentations, that's when the real questions begin. It's like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing for LPAC testing. Okay, how are we reaching each kid? What is the communication? And so some of the questions come out of the presentation, which isn't done until the actual board meeting. So that's really what drives a lot of my questions, is coming out of the actual presentations and data. Just saying.
I agree.
Can I pick another area to discuss?
You said it again.
Can I pick another area to discuss? I remember these two questions being ones that had lower scores than normal last time, or lower than highest, I guess we'll call it, which was the board gives direction to the superintendent only at board meetings, and individual board members do not attempt to direct the superintendent. I think those are directly related to each other, and worth having another conversation about. So if anybody wants to, I guess, chime in for improvements on that. Personally, I think that might come from a perception of what occurs in our one-on-ones with Michelle. I don't know where else that perception comes from, or just the amount of time people spend with Michelle, or what it is. But it's been there both times, and so I can't help but notice it. And I'm curious about others' thoughts.
I think it's a good point to bring up. And when I think about it myself, I think, maybe some of this is we sometimes get overzealous about things and we get excited to talk about those things with Michelle or other, folks that work at the district that we're excited about. And I think when I think back, I sometimes wonder, I wonder how that came off. Did that come off as a suggestion, or was I really relaying that I was excited about it? So one thing that might be helpful is maybe just asking, next time I'm with Michelle or something, if you ever feel like I'm giving you direction, please push back, because I wouldn't want to do that.
I trust that the outcome, if those things occur, if it is perceived as a directive, not to say that Michelle wouldn't follow, but she wouldn't follow a directive from one of us. She follows a directive from the whole board. And I trust that she would be patient in waiting until the board has an opportunity to discuss the whole thing with her. But that is not what the question asks. It's, are we attempting to do that? And clearly it's perceived that we are.
And that's where I was really thinking, Michelle, you're the one to really say, are we doing that to you?
I would say that if I have perceived it that way, I have said in my one-on-one to the person that this needs to come from the board of 5. I have not had to do that with this board.
Thank you. That's good to hear.
So I would say that most of that is a misperception.
So we're judging ourselves harsher than
Yes.
the reality. Thank you.
And maybe that stems from some of you can't meet one-on-one, or some keep their monthly one-on-ones and work always on time. So, and
Or somebody just is a ding dong and forgets to call Connie, and the month has gone by and she didn't do her one-on-one, and then Michelle gently reminds her she needs to do her one-on-one. I will be better with that. I promise.
You're not the only ding dongs.
Okay. I've been really,
I do think those meetings are vital, and I think that they're an important part of superintendent board relations. And I think that other districts and superintendents that don't do that work with their board, their collaboration to steer is affected by that in a negative way.
So as far as, I know that I was one of the ones in terms of not knowing how to be able to communicate this in the board evaluation. And I think sometimes this past year, there were phone and emergency board meetings. So actually, maybe back up before I say this. I took this in terms of being the board and not Michelle. I think Michelle, from what I've seen over the past several years, does an excellent job of getting the direction from the board. And has made a lot of effort to make sure that the relationship is there with all of us, so that it is public doesn't understand that each of us as individuals are powerless. And it is really through these venues that we are able to provide the communication and direction. There were a couple times, so what I was going to say before was there were a couple times this year where we had phone meetings where direction was needed to be given. And I know that there was at least twice where I don't believe all of us got a chance to chime in, because usually time was limited. So in that situation, direction was being sought, and it really did need to come from all of us, but our time management didn't allow for that to happen. And I think even the result of one of them ended up giving unclear direction. And I'd say it was on us that unclear direction was provided. And so steps were taken afterwards that wasn't directed by the board, but it was in good faith. And it wasn't, like I say, I think it was our responsibility. And so I would say be mindful when time is limited, as I go on and on talking, that we make sure that we have concise communication and all of us have a chance to get input, especially in those situations if there is a clock ticking.
so with that, Lord love a duck. That's a saying. That's a
There's another page.
It's a movie. It's a movie. Just, okay, so, what are some of the areas that we want to work on, knowing that we don't have any orange, green, red, and yellow, but maybe that we want to highlight a little bit and elevate.
So just to get this point where you're looking
Yeah,
at this
let's
and-
move on
and-
to
and-
setting our goals.
and
Yeah.
transition to board goals.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would ask the same question back to you on item number 21, where the answers are between almost always and often that board members receive the same information. So that would reflect upon me not giving the same information or cabinet. So is there something that we could do to assist in that question?
What you just clarified for us, I think, was potentially, I could be wrong, don't want to speak for everyone, a perception versus what the reality is.
I think it's the same. I mean, and of course, I have good comparison from previous superintendents and previous boards. And so I believe that it's all this, that we get all the same, and that we're able to take that information, whether it's to be in the loop and be able to answer questions from community, from employees, or students, or from or with making decisions during a board meeting. So I trust that we're all getting the same information.
I would say that there are certain areas where some of us are more involved or knowledgeable about because of other things that we do that we then know before other board members know. And that doesn't mean that the other board members don't end up getting the same information or don't have access to it or are told something when they're asked, but because we are on different committees, we're in different leadership positions or PTA positions, or we have spouses who are working in the district where we find out information at different time frames. But I don't think that's to your fault or your responsibility. It's just the nature of our roles outside of the board that are different.
And I agree. I think that especially with the board president role, the superintendent's first point of contact is always the board president to get direction. That doesn't mean that Jordana is getting more information than we are. It's just that's the first point of contact, and which is absolutely the correct protocol. So it's not, so that's the thing. You're right now. We may get different pieces of information at different times, but we all end up with the same information.
I think today as an example, we've had some crises and we were all informed appropriately. I also appreciate, and I'm still learning what everything's called, but the Friday notes, those are very thorough from all of the staff. And that really helps us and keeps us all informed. And then there's been things that have come up in between that and separate from those Friday messages. And I feel very thoroughly informed. And again, as a new person on the board, that I think I would be the one left out maybe the most easiest. So I have not felt that at all. Which says, keep writing the reports. I know they've got to be a ton of work, but thank you so much.
All of you who write the reports, we appreciate your Friday updates.
Are there any other items in the survey that we want to discuss before moving on to the goals?
You good? You good, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay. Todd, you good? Jen? Awesome. Heather, because I keep bringing you up, I'm going to keep going.
Name everyone in this room.
Exactly.
Mark.
Okay, we're done.
So moving on to the board goals, you want to, Mark, you would mind? So we have the last year's up on the screen there. We have 4 of them, and they are pretty broad.
If you have the physical copy has like the success indicators that define them better. So did we?
So bringing up some ongoing conversations in terms of board members communicating out to the community. Do we want to, I feel like I am attending a lot more now because of Zoom. Everybody and their mother's like, let's have a Zoom meeting. We can do a quick meeting, and then it's not quick. So, but do we want to somehow massage that particular? The board informs the community on district priorities, progress, needs, and opportunities for involvement. Do we want to massage that and keep working towards it? It's blue, but it doesn't, it doesn't have a 4 in almost always, or the strength.
I do think that that's an important goal, particularly for myself. I won't speak for anyone else. If the pandemic's been a rough year, but I know that I could be doing a little bit more, and I'd like to work towards it. And if you have it as a goal, I know I will.
I agree.
And then we can, in terms of, I know we need to, the time with trustees this year was just not a good good time for us to really engage the community when people were sick of Zoom meetings anyways, by the end of the day. So, I mean, that's an area that we can strengthen and decide whether we continue it or need to change to a different format or whatever, you know what I mean? But we need to really invest in it for at least another year.
I think number 3 has to be there. I mean, that's almost like a goal that should always be there
Absolutely.
to adopt a fiscally responsible budget aligned to the district's vision and goals. And you know, we know that down the road, there's financial challenges coming. We know that we continue to be in a declining population as a state, as a community and enrollment. And we've got to lead making the tough decisions, and that's not easy, but we've got to be there. So we've got to be committed to fiscal responsibility.
So,
I'll just say, oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead. No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think I like all 4 of the goals that we had. Maybe we just need to remove, replace, or amend some of the success indicators under each of those to help refine. I mean, I committed to a common vision, meetings, fiscally responsible budget, setting direction. That it all feels very good.
Well, the whole idea of the success indicator, once we have it in place and we're doing it and by rote and it's automatic and it's part of our yearly re-up, so to speak, like, you know, taking which committees, which meetings we're going to cover and observe, we can take those success indicators off because check the box, it's in place, it's ready to go. So that it doesn't feel so overwhelming.
You probably need to add a success indicator about your committee work.
Yes, good idea.
So a couple thoughts that I have is one, I agree with you, Jordan, in terms of the 4 goals as far as being general areas. We've had discussions of late about you know, being able to look at how we are able to communicate our successes. And so I think in terms of goal number 2, being able to be more specific about what we expect from ourselves. And I would, you know, not just say how to communicate our successes, which is already included, you know, celebrations, it's already included in here, but I would argue that we would want to learn how to more effectively do it. So time with trustees would be among that. Is maybe this would be a time for us to reevaluate our methods and maybe experiment to see, you know, trial and error, what might be more successful or what might be less. Because I do question whether time with trustees, I mean, I was excited about it, but the lack of attendance may be because people didn't have questions, or maybe we're not meeting them where and when and how they wish to be met.
To be honest, I get more back and forth when I'm attending and community meetings or observing meetings. I get more engagement. That's a good word, Jordan, from those. But again, establishing some other form of outreach, whether it's time or you know, changing what the format is for time with trustees or whatever. But like what you're saying is what would be more succcessful?
So possibly doing a couple of different investigative activities. One would be what are the most effective ways for us to communicate with the community and vice versa. And I would also add in here, and I think it would be more under number 3, is really evaluate. Yes, we've kind of accepted that shrinking enrollment seems to be
A trend.
a trend. It's been a long-standing trend, but again, investigatively, learn more about why. What are the what is causing it, and are there any areas that we might be able to possibly look at addressing it? So are there areas within our control?
That would be 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Which really, unfortunately, would have been some things we probably should have had in the previous discussion, that we maybe need to think about some finances towards PR, some finances towards doing some really research on what is truly happening in our community, not just in the state, but in our community. And that would be helpful for us to actually get that professional assistance. By the way, I have a request. These are really muffling everybody's sound. And if you don't mind, if you can take that mask off just when you speak into the microphone, it will help me hear you and understand you better. It's a voting evaluation.
Another thing, actually, I think would be under goal number 2, that I think would be really helpful if as a board, we did this, Cindy's kind of started with the legislative reports. But as a board putting together and having at our disposal available to us, talking points, because we are, I think, doing a pretty good job of getting out there through Zoom at this point with various, to various different agencies. But if we were able to, maybe through the media committee or another way, have a one sheet that we put together of consistent talking points that we and update it. I think that would be really helpful.
Okay, Don, I'm taking off my mask. So in SANDAPS and with CSBA, when we meet with legislators, that we have talking points on behalf of the collective mutual concerns of the county, 33 school districts. Just, you know, we talk always about the budget, and that includes PERS and STIRS and stuff, but also it may change per the audience that we're speaking to. But give an example of a talking point that are you thinking something along those lines, or are you thinking of something else?
I'm thinking in terms of going to be attending MAC meeting. And what are the key things that we want to be able to make sure, whether you're attending to Lake Arrowhead, I'm attending Crestlines. Was that?
It's tonight, so I missed it.
Yeah, but regardless, that we know that there are certain, as a group, we have certain things that we know that, you know, even if we're bumping into somebody in the grocery store, hey, what's going on in the school district, or what's happening, what are the big things? And that we know, okay, it's these big 5, boom, 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 and it'd be great if you could write letters for this. So, I mean, we're doing, so, but, and it could also be, and we have a rim wrestler who is nationally ranked, or, I mean, it could be, it isn't just call to action, but what are the big things we want the community to know?
Yeah. Well, you have to be strategic in asking your community to call to action, because it can be exhausting to constantly get hit up with, hey, write some letters, contact your local elected leader. It can be exhausting. You get burned out in trying to be advocating for you all the time. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that would be cool. Create talking points, platform. So why don't we, so what I'm hearing is that we're going to keep the singles, but let's rework the success indicators because a lot of these are now in place. So let's move ourselves forward instead of just recycling the same things we're doing already and intend to continue.
Now there's something you want to say? Oh,
She answered my question.
awesome.
Well, maybe not one, because we haven't really worked, we haven't been able to get that to the place that we're having stakeholders meetings and having those discussions. So I'll just saying some of that, those success indicators might have to stay.
Gotcha. And I know we will be having our board retreat this summer, so that would be goal 2E. And I think that has been something that I don't know that we need to continue to have that on there. I have a concern about the board retreat and that there's a lot of things that we have said, okay, we'll deal with that on the retreat. We'll deal with that on the retreat. And so what I wonder about is talking about having a talking points one pager. We have the social justice and equity. Maybe we'll be doing something in terms of enrollment. I don't know, but maybe taking approach, this could be a board goal, is to divide and conquer rather than it being a committee of 5 addressing everything. Using the board retreat to take a look at our strengths and the strength, maybe Phil can go through and do the strength exercise or however we wish to do it, but really try and figure out what are our goals and then divide and attack.
I love that.
So in reworking the success indicators, is that for goal number 2, are there any that you want to actually keep in here? Can we, maybe the time with trustees, we rework that to explore, continue time with trustees, but explore what you said about it. Other avenues of.
Maybe instead of time with trustees, maybe it'd be community outreach.
What does that look like?
I don't know. That would be the question. Maybe it would be in a couple of different ways. Maybe we have a table outside the post office. I don't know.
So maybe that, yeah, so maybe that's something for the media. If you're talking about divide and conquer, maybe the media committee can put together explore some options to bring back to the board to discuss. How does that work? Okay, so then that would be a success indicator. Media committee explores community outreach. And then another success indicator is develop talking points. These are big things.
Yes, they are.
So let's not give ourselves too many things. Just saying, let's do it. We did a lot in establishing foundations, so we just want to refine.
Do we want to have a subcommittee, maybe propose some success indicators to the board?
Yeah, 2 people can work on the success indicators.
I think that would be a great idea, because if we go through these one by one, and if we're really going to eliminate the ones that we've already implemented, we are eliminating all of them.
Well, under goal 1, I mean, we haven't really worked on it, so that one's easy. It's there. Yay, we're done. That one's done. So it's 2, 3, and 4.
I would be happy to work on that if somebody else wants to as well, or do it.
Well, and last time, like in 3, B, C, and D, these are all like continued. It says continue in it because we had already established it before. So we're on 2 years of doing those things. I think it's fair to take them off, but this is part of the routine.
And everything gets brought back to the board for approval anyway, so it can be amended one more time and approved as amended. So Jordan is 1.
I think Jordan and Dana agree.
Okay, just make sure the success indicators are attainable and measurable, so that there's an actual outcome in some way.
So SMART goal.
Yes.
Whatever you want us to call it, just so that we can, what I'm saying.
Certainly. Anything else on 8.2? Okay, on to 9.0 action calendar. 9.1 personnel services, approval of the certificated management, classified management, and classified confidential salary schedules. The salaries reflect a 3% increase effective 7/1/2020. This will impact approximately $73,925. Unrestricted general fund, district office personnel.
So moved. Second.
So Cindy moved and Natalie seconded. Any discussion? Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 9.2 Personnel Services, approval of the ROP salary schedule reflecting an increase of 3% effective 7/1/2020 and annualized from hourly to contract with 3 additional workdays effective 7/1/2021. Fiscal impact approximately $16,881. Unrestricted general fund, district office personnel.
So moved.
Cindy,
Second.
Natalie, trend here. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 9.3 Personnel Services, approval of the district office receptionist job description. Fiscal impact, none.
So moved.
Second.
Cindy, Natalie. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 10.0 future meeting dates. Regular board meeting, May 20, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. YouTube, limited in-person attendance at the Rim High School Library. Regular board meeting, June 10th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. YouTube, limited in-person attendance at the Rim High School Library. All future meetings will be held via YouTube and there will be limited in-person attendance at the Rim High School Library for the public until executive orders change regarding gatherings. 11.0 adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 9:14 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes unanimously.